For decades, many African nations have been bound to a financial system imposed by their former colonial master, France. This system, known as the CFA franc, has long served as a tool for European powers to maintain control over African economies. However, a new wave of leadership is rising, determined to sever these lingering ties and establish true financial sovereignty. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have taken a bold stance against the continued dominance of the CFA franc. These nations are forging a new economic path, free from the constraints imposed by foreign interests. This marks a historic moment as they work together to build a currency system that prioritizes their own economic interests rather than those of their former colonizers. In this context, Burkina Faso, under the leadership of President Ibrahim Traoré, has taken significant steps toward financial independence by introducing a new national currency, the SIRA, and establishing a Treasury Deposit Bank. These initiatives mark a decisive break from the neo-colonial financial structures that have long hindered the region's progress. The CFA franc, introduced by France on December 26, 1945, was designed to integrate African economies under French control. Even after gaining political independence, many African nations continued to use the currency, allowing France to retain financial dominance. The system required African nations to deposit a substantial portion of their foreign reserves into French banks, restricting their ability to manage their own monetary policies. This arrangement ensured that France maintained economic leverage over its former colonies, effectively dictating financial conditions across the region. The flaws of the CFA franc have been widely criticized. Countries using it are unable to set their own interest rates, devalue their currency when needed, or make independent financial decisions without France's approval. Additionally, because the CFA is pegged to the euro, it artificially inflates the cost of African exports, making them less competitive on the global market. This has stifled industrial growth, leaving these nations dependent on raw material exports rather than developing their own industries. Recognizing these constraints, Burkina Faso has positioned itself at the forefront of a movement to reclaim financial independence. President Ibrahim Traoré has not only withdrawn from ECOWAS, a bloc perceived as being under strong French influence, but he has also championed economic reforms that include the launch of the SIRA currency. Unlike the CFA, the SIRA is fully controlled by Burkina Faso, allowing the country to set its own monetary policies, regulate inflation, and promote local industry without external interference. To support this shift, the newly created Treasury Deposit Bank will safeguard the country's financial reserves, eliminating the requirement to deposit funds in French-controlled banks. This move ensures that the nation's wealth remains within its borders, reinforcing economic sovereignty. Although the establishment of a new currency is a critical step toward financial liberation, it is not without risks. Transitioning from the CFA to the SIRA requires the development of a stable monetary system, proper regulatory frameworks, and mechanisms to manage exchange rates. Any missteps in this transition could lead to economic instability, including inflation and fluctuations in market confidence. Additionally, Western powers, particularly France, may impose economic sanctions or diplomatic pressures to discourage such financial independence. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. Despite these challenges, the resolve of Burkina Faso and its allies remains strong. The leaders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso view their economic emancipation as a necessary step toward true sovereignty. Their defiance has already inspired widespread discussions across the continent, with other African nations questioning their continued reliance on the CFA franc. If successful, Burkina Faso's reforms could set a precedent for other former French colonies seeking to break free from economic dependence. This shift also has broader implications beyond Africa. By forging alliances with non-Western nations, including Venezuela and Russia, Burkina Faso is positioning itself within a new geopolitical framework. These partnerships could lead to increased investment in key industries, military cooperation, and technological advancements. However, they also come with their own complexities, as aligning with anti-imperialist movements may strain relations with Western powers and international financial institutions. As Burkina Faso moves forward with these economic reforms, it must carefully navigate both internal and external pressures. The success of the SIRA currency and the Treasury Deposit Bank will depend on strategic planning, economic resilience, and diplomatic agility. While the path ahead is uncertain, one thing is clear: Burkina Faso is determined to carve out its own future, free from the constraints of neo-colonial financial systems. Whether this bold gamble will pay off remains to be seen, but it is undoubtedly a pivotal moment in the nation's history. The impact of these decisions will be felt across Africa. If Burkina Faso successfully establishes financial independence, other nations may follow suit, triggering a broader movement toward economic self-determination. The end of the CFA franc's dominance could mark the beginning of a new era, where African nations control their own financial destinies. With the introduction of the SIRA and the establishment of a national treasury, President Traoré has sent a clear message. Burkina Faso will no longer be bound by outdated systems that prioritize foreign interests over its own people. The journey ahead may be challenging, but is one fueled by a vision of true independence, prosperity, and national pride. Ibrahim Traoré's decision to introduce the SIRA currency places him in a precarious position, much like other African leaders who have attempted to break away from Western-controlled financial systems. The introduction of SIRA is not just an economic move. It is a direct challenge to the global order that has long kept African nations economically dependent. By establishing an independent currency and creating a Treasury Deposit Bank, Traoré is signaling Burkina Faso's intent to reclaim its financial sovereignty, a move that history has shown to be dangerous for those who dare. A striking parallel can be drawn between Traoré's bold economic reforms and the fate of Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, who sought to introduce the gold-backed dinar as a unified African currency. Gaddafi's vision aimed to free African nations from the dominance of the US dollar and the euro by creating a currency that was truly independent and backed by Libya's vast gold reserves. This would have allowed African countries to trade resources without relying on Western financial institutions, threatening the economic stranglehold that the West maintained over the continent. However, this ambition was met with extreme opposition. Shortly after pushing for the gold dinar, Gaddafi was overthrown and assassinated in 2011, following a NATO-led intervention, a move many believe was orchestrated to prevent the emergence of a financially independent Africa. The pattern of Western interference against leaders who resist financial subjugation is not new. Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's own revolutionary leader, was assassinated in 1987 after challenging the neo-colonial structures imposed on African nations. Sankara called for economic independence, self-reliance, and the rejection of debt as a tool of Western control. His radical ideas made him a target, and he was eliminated under circumstances widely believed to have been influenced by external powers. Similarly, Patrice Lumumba of the Democratic Republic of Congo faced a brutal end in 1961 after attempting to assert control over his nation's vast mineral wealth, threatening Western economic interests. More recently, John Magufuli of Tanzania also faced backlash for his policies aimed at reducing foreign influence over the country's economy. While his sudden death in 2021 was officially attributed to natural causes, many suspect foul play, given his defiance of international financial institutions and his push for national economic independence. These instances highlight a recurring pattern where African leaders would attempt to break away from Western-controlled financial systems, often face dire consequences. Ibrahim Traoré's decision to introduce SIRA puts him in the same category of defiant leaders who have historically been viewed as threats to global financial powers. By taking control of Burkina Faso's monetary policy and removing French influence over its economy, he is challenging powerful interests that have long benefited from Africa's financial dependence. The risks he faces are significant, as history has shown that leaders who attempt to dismantle these systems often pay the ultimate price. However, the determination of Burkina Faso's leadership and its growing alliances suggest that the struggle for true economic independence is far from over. The question remains, will Traoré succeed where others have fallen, or will history repeat itself once again? Tell us what you think in the comments section below.